social progress aspects, with which there is a strong diabetes care and research care that have been established globally. Along with that, university is also working in other chronic therapy areas, which includes obesity, growth hormone disorders, hemophilia, and many others. Apart from this, there is also an NGO called uh, Novo Nordisk Education Foundation, established in the year 1997, which is working to improve infrastructure for care diabetes people. The model suggested here adapted is Act model for changing diabetes, which stands for awareness, capacity building, and treatment. The two important projects are currently running under this NGO are changing diabetes in still supply free of cost in children with type 1 diabetes who are under 10 years. There is also Impact India 1000 Days Challenge that was started in the year 2018 to improve the status of the country. It is also my pleasure to share with all the doctors here that half of the world insulin is supplied by Novo Nordisk, and there are more than 30 million people globally who is using diabetes care products. I would like to thank all the doctors for having trust in products of Novo Nordisk and improving the reach of these products to benefit many people with diabetes. There are several challenges in spite of 100 years of insulin discovery for both patients in worldwide as well as in India in terms of accessibility and affordability. And it is an organization about to improve the availability of these insulins to remotest corners of the country. When it comes to affordability, just think a simple analogy: how many people are using two-wheelers in India? That is around 36% of the households. How many people in our country are using four-wheelers in India? That is 11% of the households. Almost 95.8 players are there in India. What is this analogy shows us that there are different people are from different economic backgrounds in our country, and Novo Nordisk has a responsibility to gather all these different population groups to include the reach of insulins to different sections of the society, so that the insulins are available at every price point. With this, we have an inspiration and a theme called as insulin for every Indian, in which includes human insulins, modern insulins, as well as next generation insulins are available at different price points, so that it caters the different sections of the society. With this brief introduction about the organization commitment uh, to improve diabetes care, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Sepuri Krishnamohan sir, who is a renowned clinical endocrinologist and diabetologist. Is practicing at Sepuri Diabetes Center, Kannur. And sir is having over 30 years of clinical experience. And our second speaker is Dr. Sepuri Tirumala Devi Madam. She is a renowned clinical endocrinologist and diabetologist. She is also practicing at Sepuri Diabetes Center, Kannur. Now, I would like to hand over it to Dr. Sepuri Krishnamohan sir to take over the session on challenges of type 2 diabetes management in India, A to E one solution. Sir, over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Srikant, for your kind introduction. So let me share my screen.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think
We are able to see the
Srikant, am I audible and am I visible? And is my
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
is my
Your voice, sir.
screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Srikant, for your kind words. And very good evening, dear my friends and fellow colleagues. Indeed, this is a very happy evening to be with you. We'll talk something about insulins today, and our topic being the challenges of the management of type 2 diabetes mellitus in India, a two-in-one solution. So before I get into the session, I request all the participants to type your questions and put it in the chat box so that we'll take up the question and answer session at the end. With that, I just get into the topic. Thank you so much. And this is my financial disclosure, and I am thankful to Nowadays for giving me this opportunity to be a speaker today's evening. And our agenda will be like the part one will talk about the type 2 diabetes in India, the status of care, and next we'll talk about the factors that impact the choice of insulin therapy, and finally we'll talk about the innovations over the time to best suit Indian realities. So because there are different segments of population from below poverty line to the highly creamy layer, so what suits best to this particular diversified Indian population we are going to discuss. And this is, all of us, you are well aware that this is the diabetes care in India, and where do we stand actually. So India is the home to the second largest number of adults living with diabetes worldwide. In fact, until 2012, India was the number one country with the largest patients suffering from diabetes, and the WHO has accredited India as the capital city of diabetes. And later on, China took over India and has become the number one country with a lot of diabetes population. And now we are in the second position, and the US is in the third position, and the Pakistan is in the fourth position actually. So if we take the top four countries, almost you find three Asian countries, one being the China on the top, the second being India, the second top, and the fourth one is again Pakistan. So the prevalence of the incidence is very high in the developing countries like China, India and Pakistan. And you can always notice the change. Nowadays we are trying to make our India a diabetes capital care with the help of Novartis like legendary institutions, not the diabetes capital. It is the diabetes care capital. That's we are trying to transform. Like with all of your help and cooperation, I think it's not a big deed for us to make diabetes capital of the world into like let us transform this into a diabetes capital care of the world with the clinical excellence and the best possible treatments, the best modalities we have. And 1 in 18 adults have diabetes. This is as per the Indian statistics. We know how standard the Indian statistics are. I am not criticizing, but I am telling you once again the fact. The fact is much more like to the best of my knowledge of 3 decades of experience, at least 1 in 5 adults have diabetes. And it says more than 57% of the people with diabetes are undiagnosed. Absolutely, more than that. More than 60% of the patients who are suffering from diabetes are still, they remain undiagnosed. And the total estimated population will be 77 million people as per the Atlas of the International Diabetes Federation 2019 actually. And 44 million people, they just remain undiagnosed. And you come to the last part of the slide, you can see that 10,000 people die from diabetes related causes. Maybe it is the macrovascular complications or the microvascular complications. That's the life threatening the cardiovascular death, which includes the stroke and the heart failure, let it be an acute heart failure or a chronic heart failure or an unstable angina, whatever it may be, or the strokes. And the peripheral vascular disease is the number one cause for the most of the amputations that are being done in India very extensively. The lower limb extremity amputations, that is called LLEA. And the deaths per day because of diabetes in India are roughly around 2,768, and the cost we incur per annum towards the doctor consultation or the laboratory expenditure or the pharmaceutical expenses is somewhere around some 52,000 crores, which is a huge amount for a developing country like India. And all this in a population that has got very peculiar features, like when compared to the Caucasian population, we Indians have relatively a very earlier type 2 diabetes mellitus onset, that is at least 10 to 15 years prior to the onset of the diabetes in the Caucasians. We see this particular rare phenomena in Indians. And the second rare phenomena is rather than the insulinopenia, we find the high incidence of insulin resistance in our the Southeast Asian population, that is especially the Indian subcontinent, and finally the greater insulin secretory defects, because all of you know that the beta cells of the pancreas, they do secrete the insulin, and there are two phases of insulin secretion always, you remember. The first phase of insulin response, the FIPR, and the second phase of insulin response. These are the two phases wherein the type 2 diabetes is very much characterized by the loss of first phase of insulin response and delayed or blunted second phase of insulin response, which are called the insulin secretory defects. And when compared to the Western counterparts, these are all the peculiarities what we see when compared to the Canadians, when compared to the Americans, when compared to the Europeans or the Britishers. We find all these very typical characteristic features that predominate in our country, and the reason why the incidence is going up like anything is because of the three major the pathophysiological features. So the burden of diabetes in India is 4 in 5 people with diabetes are uncontrolled. See, this is the pathetic part. Though we are sending the rockets onto the moon or to the Mars, so many things we are doing. It's a very diversified country in India. That is, on one side you see still people going barefoot with the bullock carts into their fields. And on the other side, the ISRO people, they launched their rockets onto the moon and satellites onto the moon, onto the Mars, or whatever it may be. And it has become very popular with these innovations. But still, the downtrodden people and the below poverty line people are more existent in India. Maybe because of the lack of literacy. The illiteracy is the main cause, or the lack of the medical care in India. I think these are the reasons for that. And the current status of management, control, complications, and psychosocial aspects of the diabetes with patients with diabetes in India. The results from the Diab Care India 2011 study, which was done by our mentor, Dr. V. Mohan, the Vishwanathan Mohan, way back in 2011, and the number they included was 5,909 patients, and a BMG Open Diabetes Research and Care that published real world evidence of glycemic control among the patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus in India. That was called the TIGHT study, that was published in 2019, and the number was 55,693 individuals. And then another article published in Diabetes and the Clinical Practice, factors affecting the achievement of glycemic target among the type 2 diabetes patients in South Asia, analysis of the CARS study, CARRS, that is 2020, the latest one, the number is 1146. And coming to this, these studies, what they have shown, the Diab Care India 2011 or the TIGHT study or the CARS study, what it has shown is the people with type 2 diabetes having HbA1c of less than 7%, that is to the target, according to the American Diabetes Association. See, there are certain international bodies like American College of Endocrinology, ACE, and there is one more called AACE, that is American Association for the Clinical Endocrinologists. They say it should be somewhere around 6.5, but a reasonable target, to the best of my knowledge and my experience, is less than 7% is reasonable, so that the patient will not get into hypoglycemia. According to the Diab Care India study, which was published in 2011, only 19.7% of the patients who were taking the treatment were to the target of A1C less than 7%. And according to the TIDE study, it was like 2019, and it little bit improved. It shows the number is very large, like 55,693 individuals suffering from diabetes and are taking the treatment. And to the target of A1C of less than 7, the number was surprisingly 23.4%. And the last one, that is the CAR study, that is the subjects under the control of A1C is less than 7%, was only 16.3. So you take an average of all this, it is something around some the 18 to 19% will be like to the target, less than 20%. It's so that is why I have said 4 in 5 people. That is, so the 20% is to the target, and the remaining 80% is out of the target. That is more than 7% of HbA1c. So 4 in 5 people with diabetes are uncontrolled. And on the right hand side, you can see this the diagram. In the center, it shows IDCI. This is nothing but India Diabetes Care Index, that is innovated by the Novo Nordisk itself, to see the ranges of the fasting and the postprandial and the A1C at different levels of the population, different states and different areas. That's what the average A1C was shown to be, according to IDCI, that is India Diabetes Care Index, is 8.48%, and the fasting was somewhere around some 176.3 milligram per deciliter, and the postprandial glucose was somewhere around some 251.33 milligram per deciliter. So it's terribly out of control, at least 1.5% away from the target HbA1c according to the American Diabetes Association, even the latest 2021 guidelines, and even according to the latest guidelines of this 80 to 130 being the fasting range, it is around 176, and it is more than that, the 251, the postprandial, which is very high when compared to the normalcy. And all the time I give a take home message with regards to the high postprandial glucose. This is related to the high incidence and increased incidence of cardiovascular morbidity and mortality. When compared to the high fasting glucose, the high postprandial glucose is very much associated with the increased incidence in the cardiovascular morbidity and mortality. So major 7 studies have shown that I would like to tell the landmark study, the Honolulu study, that was the landmark study which has shown that a normal fasting and an abnormal postprandial excursion is always related with a cardiovascular event, finally leading to death. So we need to keep all the parameters to the target, either the fasting or the postprandial, whatever it may be, the post breakfast or post lunch or the post dinner, or the fasting or the pre lunch or the pre dinner, whatever it may be, all the gold standard, the recommended 7-point formula of self blood glucose monitoring should be to the target all the time. That is 24/7, the patient must be to the target. And finally, I would like to conclude by saying the only 22% of the people with diabetes have HbA1c of less than 7%. See, this is very pathetic actually. This is what is going on in India. With all your cooperation, I think we can go for and we can move towards a better figures if we are very much interested in the interest of the patients. And this slide is very important. Every 1% of the reduction in HbA1c counts, and it impacts on the diabetes related complications. Let it be microvascular complications or the macrovascular complications. The macrovascular being again and again, I tell you, the cardiovascular disease and the strokes, that is called the atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, and the heart failures and the strokes and the peripheral vascular disease or the peripheral arterial disease, PVD or PAD. These are the major the macrovascular complications. And the microvascular complications, all the time it is diabetic kidney disease and the diabetic retinopathy and the diabetic neuropathy. So the UKPDS, these are all the evidence-based medicine taken from the UKPDS, the landmark study which is being done in the field of diabetes, that is United Kingdom Prospective Diabetes Study, that is 35. See, this study was started way back in 1977. After 10 years, 1987, they evaluated these results, and after 10 years again, 1997, they evaluated. Even after 30 years, 2007 also they evaluated, and 40 years, 2017 also it is been evaluated, and now it's ongoing, that is UKPDS ongoing. So the drugs they used is the antihypertensive being the atenolol at that particular time, 77, and the diabetes related drugs they used were, apart from the lifestyle measures, the diet and exercise, it was metformin and the sulfonylurea, the glibenclamide and the insulin. These were the only three agents at that particular time. Nothing was available as on that particular date, dating back to 1977, when I was I think I was in like 6th class or 7th class maybe. And you can see every 1% of drop in glycated hemoglobin is associated with decreased risk of the following. That is, you can find a 12% risk in the incidence of stroke, and the cataract extraction by 19%, and heart failure by 16%, and myocardial infarction by 14%, and lower extremity amputations, that is LLEA, lower limb extremity amputations, are the fatal peripheral vascular disease by 43%. It's a very, very significant number, 43%. And the microvascular disease is by 37% risk reduction, and the all-cause mortality was reduced by 14%, and death related to diabetes was reduced by 21%. And you literally get bewildered, puzzled when you come to know that it's only because of just reduction of 1% in the glycated hemoglobin, that is 1% reduction in the HbA1c is going to do all the magic. And when you can like able to get back to the normalcy of the goal, the less than 7 or in between 6.5 and 7, how much of the benefit the patient is going to have with your treatment. So I mind you, please take care of the patients in a much better way. Counsel them, convince them, and try to motivate them towards the better treatment. We have got so many new modalities of treatment, including the injectable ones like insulin, and the even non-insulin injectables like GLP-1 analogs, and the latest drugs have come like the DPP-4 inhibitors or the SGLT2 inhibitors. So try to make use of that, and let's move towards a better patient treatment targets. And this bar diagram very clearly shows the insulin is the one molecule that offers the maximum glycemic efficacy. That is, the reductions in the A1C are seen, the maximum reductions of the A1C are seen only with the insulins, not with any other drugs. For example, you can take this bar diagram, you can see starting from the GLP-1 receptor agonists like the exenatide or the liraglutide or the semaglutide or the albiglutide or the dulaglutide. So many are there. So even the people are coming with the oral semaglutide actually, first of its kind, and semaglutide is injectable semaglutide from Novo Nordisk is once a day injection, very convenient, still not yet available in our country, soon it will be available. So GLP-1 receptor agonists decrease the A1C by 1.12% and the DPP-4 inhibitors 0.74 and the alpha glucosidase inhibitors by 0.72%, and the thiazolidine as of now we have only one thiazolidine. So rosiglitazone is taken away from the market, which is very much available in the US and the UK and the Canada and all the places with a black box warning. That's it. And the pioglitazone we have, and that is very good insulin sensitizer, and that decreases the A1C by 0.96%, and the sulfonylureas 0.77. But to the best of my knowledge, I think sulfonylureas, it's more than 1% to 1.5% reduction will be there with sulfonylureas. And the glinides, that is the netiglinide and the repaglinide, the glinides, they cause 0.64%, and the metformin per se, it causes 1.21% reduction in the A1C from the baseline A1C. And when we come to the right hand side, the basal insulin reduces by 1.28% of the glycated hemoglobin, and the biphasic premixed insulins, so they reduce to the maximum, that is 1.91% of the HbA1c, and the prandial insulins, that is called the bolus insulin, that is to the tune of 1.08%, and the basal bolus is to the tune of 1.22% of reduction in the A1C. And the last, finally we find the SGLT2 inhibitors, it is 0.74, but it depends on the dose. Like when you use 10 milligram of empagliflozin, maybe it is somewhere around some 8 to 0.9%. When you use 25 milligram of the empagliflozin, maybe it crosses definitely more than 1% of reduction in the A1C. And let's move on to the second part of our program, and the factors that impact the choice of insulin therapy. And this is a typical Indian plate, the very colorful, very tempting and mouth-watering Indian plate with a lot of rice, puris again made of wheat flour and oil and all, and you can see lot of sabji and all, including the curd and the curries and the sambar and dal and everything. And this is a very colorful Indian hotel plate. That's what we see now, maybe not in our houses on daily basis. When you go to a hotel, when you order for a thali, especially the South Indian thali differs from the North Indian thali. This is a classical example of South Indian thali with a lot of rice and all, and a fried chili on that, okay. And this is all the totally it contains the more amounts of carbohydrates and very less of proteins, and okay, oil is reasonably good, okay, good. And high carbohydrate diet is a common Indian reality. This is the take home message. Why our patients are not able to get back to the normalcy or to the target A1C is because of the high carbohydrate consumption. That is a regular habit for common Indians, because in the southern parts the staple diet is rice, and the northern parts the staple diet is the wheat. So both are very high in this thing, the carbohydrate content, and it's better one moves on to the whole grains and the millets instead of all these things, because they contain the complex carbohydrates and less of carbohydrates, which will control the diabetes. So when you come to the comparisons, the eastern part of the India and the western part of the India, the northern part of India and the southern part of India and the central India, the red bar diagram, you find the red one is the carbohydrates, and then the blue one is the proteins, and the green one is the fats. So on an average, every Indian is consuming more than 60 to 70% of the carbohydrates with very less of this thing proteins and more of oil. You see the least being the protein, whether in the east, west, north, south, central. So these are all the different geographical regions of India. So this is high time we have to move to a plate which consists of 40% of the carbohydrates and 30% of proteins and 30% of fats. So the fats being essentially the 10% should be the saturated fatty acids and 90% of the fat intake should be in the form of mono unsaturated fatty acids or the polyunsaturated fatty acids, that is either MUFA or PUFA. In the form of the unsaturated fatty acid should be 90% and only less than 10% of the saturated fatty acids. The best example I can give you is the saturated fat is the coconut oil or the ghee what we take, that is the dalda which is not to be taken actually, and the palm oil which is not to be taken. And you better go for the oils, very healthy oils like soy oil or this groundnut oil or this olive oil and all. They are very good. And nowadays the rice bran oil also is very good, which has got the more of MUFA and PUFA and less of the saturated fats. And when it comes to the carbohydrates, ask your patient to take lot of complex carbohydrates rather than the simple carbohydrates. And protein, all the time you increase the quantity of protein, whether the vegetarian protein, that is plant based protein, or the non-vegetarians from the animal based protein, whatever it may be, but try to avoid red meat. It's always better to take egg. With yellow you can take, because nowadays we're facing the pandemic of COVID-19, and egg yellow has got lot of vitamins, like the D vitamin is very much present in the egg yellow, and you can change the scenario just like that. So increase the quantity of protein to 40%, 30%, increase the fats to 30%, reduce the carbs to 40%. So half of your plate must be full of vegetables and leafy vegetables and fruits, and another half, some 25% must be carbohydrates, and 25% must be the whole grains and the cereals and the pulses and the nuts and everything. That should be the latest concept of the meal plate. That is, so to conclude, 61 to 70% of the energy intake in Indians is through carbohydrates, that is present in our day-to-day diet. It's high time we have to move, because diet is the integral part of the diabetes management. Not only diabetes, integral part of per se I would like to say diet, exercise, reduction of weight, and cessation of smoking and cessation of alcohol. These are all put together a comprehensive word. The therapeutic lifestyle changes is now we need to advocate to all our patients to counter the obesity or the diabetes or the hypertension or the dyslipidemia or the coronary vascular the diseases or the cerebrovascular diseases or even the cancers also. So next move on to the a subject who eats 3 times a day, 50% of the day is spent in postprandial phase. So this is very important. You can see here the hollow is postprandial state, and the one with the gray is post absorptive stage, and the black is the fasting stage. Indian scenario is worse owing to high carbohydrate. That's what we discussed all the time. You can see the bar diagram on the right hand side. The breakfast is like from lunch to dinner, and there's a long gap between the dinner and the breakfast again, and you see the postprandial state and more of a post-absorptive state in the breakfast, and in the lunch again you find a much post-absorptive state and a postprandial state. and from dinner to breakfast you find the postprandial state again and the post-absorptive state and a very less fasting state. See, almost the patient is almost in the postprandial state and the post-absorptive state when compared to the fasting state. So treatment strategies should address both meal-related and fasting hyperglycemia for the optimum control of HbA1c, because HbA1c is determined not only by the fasting but also by the postprandial state. So both components are very important in determining the levels of HbA1c. So we need to target the fasting as well as the postprandial. I have told you the Honolulu study, the importance of the control of postprandial blood sugars with regards to the increased incidence of risk of cardiovascular disease. And the evidence from Indian studies, the high postprandial glucose and high HbA1c. Nick, can you please mute yourself? Somebody is making noise, it seems. Okay, please. Please. So you can see this bar diagram, and you can see this the gray one is the fasting and the navy blue, dark blue is the postprandial state. And according to the India Diabetes Care Index by Novo Nordisk people, the fasting, average fasting being 170 milligrams per deciliter, and the postprandial is 251.4 milligram per deciliter. As per the DAB care, that is Dr. Mohan et al. 2011, that was a landmark study purely based on the Indian population. The average fasting was 148 milligram per deciliter, and the postprandial was 205 milligram per deciliter. So the A1C Chief, that is a different study where it showed 194 milligrams per deciliter of fasting plasma glucose and 289 milligrams per deciliter of postprandial plasma glucose. And the present study shows the 194 of the fasting and 285 milligram per deciliter of the postprandial glucose. And last is the improved study, that has shown like 192 milligram per deciliter of fasting and 279 milligram per deciliter of postprandial blood sugars. So you can correlate from here to there. You find a red arrow mark. This is the target actually where it is supposed to be, and it went on like and the curve got flattened. So the A1C is ranging from 8.6 to 8.8 to 9 to 9.2 to 9.4. This is terribly bad. So we need to always go for an intensive control to control the excursions in the either the fasting or the postprandial excursions must be meticulously taken care, and to counter the prevent the complications in the long run, either the microvascular or the macrovascular. And the uncontrolled glycemia in India demands timely treatment, optimization and insulin therapy that offers a total control. So insulin therapy is nothing but we start, that is we initiate insulin, that is called initiation, and then the second phase is called the optimization, and the third phase is called the intensification of insulin, which is highly required at this point of time. So unlike Western population, postprandial glucose should be controlled at all levels of HbA1c in Asians. See, this is the typical classical Asian picture, and you find the fasting in the gray, and the blue one is the postprandial glucose, and the gray one is the fasting plasma glucose. According to Manier and et al., they said higher contribution of postprandial glucose at lower HbA1c levels, similar to the Caucasian data. That is this is taken from the references from the Manier and et al. And they have said again the significant contribution from the postprandial glucose even at higher HbA1c levels in Asians, unlike the Caucasian data. and this clearly shows that you can see the A1C quintiles, it is less than 7.1% from 7.1 to 7.5, 7.6 to 8, and 8.1 to 8.7, and 8.8 to 12.7%. So all the time take home message is try to keep the patient. If the patient is the young, there are multiple factors which depend how we should go for either the intensive control or a relaxed control, that is conventional control. That is, if the age is young, if the duration of the diabetes is so short, if the patient is not able to, is able to bear the hypoglycemia, he is not getting into serious hypoglycemias, he has no other comorbid conditions like hypertension, dyslipidemia, thyroid, hypothyroid, or so on. So, and if the longevity of the life is more, you should go for a tight control. And in contrary, the elderly people who cannot tolerate the hypoglycemias with all the comorbidities like hypertension, dyslipidemia, and the hypothyroidism, or the coronary artery disease, or the strokes, they should be like left over to the conventional control. That is the difference between the intensive treatment and the conventional treatment. So we should try to aim a target of A1C of 7 in the conventional arm and 6.5 to 7 in the intensive arm. So the key realities of managing diabetes in India that impact the choice of therapy for insulin initiation. First of all, already we have discussed the high carbohydrate content which is there in our 3-time meal, that is the breakfast and the lunch and the dinner. They always remember the breakfast like a king and lunch like an officer and dinner like a beggar if the patient is not on insulin. So to prevent the nocturnal hypoglycemias. So the high postprandial glucose levels and the patients uncontrolled on multiple OADs. This is the common scenario we see in day-to-day practice. See, they, in spite of repeated counseling, they take high carbohydrate diet and they take sweets. What we say don't and all, they do that only. So that's what the need for simplicity and convenience. These are the practical problems we see. The patients on multiple OADs, 3 OADs, 4 OADs, 5 OADs, still the patient says no to insulin. When there is pancreatic bankruptcy, when there is no functioning beta cell mass, when the mass has gone down below, the functioning mass has gone below 25%, no OAD is going to give you the results. The patient has to be put on insulin. And what is the choice of insulin? See, the question here is, can OD basal insulin will do all these the exercises? No, absolutely not, to the best of my knowledge. So along with the tradition, why we start the basal insulin is like according to the evidence-based medicine, we start with the basal insulin, though it's not going to get the HbA1c to the normalcy, either the fasting to the normalcy. Usually fasting will be normal when the patient is on basal insulin, but not the postprandial, because it cannot control the postprandial excursions, because basal insulins are little bit peakless. They maintain the basal insulin. They cannot control the prandial insulin. So why we initiate basal insulin is we believe in the concept that fix the fasting first. 3 F's. Fix the fasting first, then automatically the postprandial will come to the control. So we have got different types of insulin, starting from basal insulin or the basal plus insulin and the biphasic premixed insulins and the human insulins and the analogs also in that. And again we have got the regular insulin or the short acting insulins. These are all the types of insulins what we have, and the basal bolus what we have. These are the different types of insulins what we have. And about basal insulin, be suitable in cases of high carb diet? Absolutely not. And offer direct control of postprandial glucose? Absolutely not. That's what I have been discussing all the time. Be suitable. Can OD basal insulin be suitable in case of delayed insulin therapy? Absolutely not. And can OD basal insulin offer convenience at insulin initiation with the direct total control, that is the fasting plasma glucose and the postprandial plasma glucose, that is called the total control? It cannot. That's what I said. It has got its own limitations, but we still cannot say absolutely no to basal insulin because of the fear of the injections. We start the patient on basal insulin, though it is practically not possible with all these things. It is not suitable in case of hypocarb diet. It cannot offer control over the postprandial glucose, and it is not a drug of choice in the delayed insulin therapy. And where you opt for a total control, that is fasting and postprandial, and basal will control very good the fasting plasma glucose in a very fashioned manner, but not the postprandial, please. So, do we have a solution to address these Indian realities in the management of type 2 diabetes mellitus? Yes, absolutely we have. And coming to the last part of our talk, the innovations over time to suit the best of the Indian realities. So it's a happy year actually, because 2021 we have surpassed a century actually, the 100th birthday of insulin. Way back in 1921, Grant Frederick Banting and Charles H. Best, along with J.J.R. MacLeod and James Collip, they were able to isolate the insulin from pancreas of the dog actually. That was the landmark in the history of medicine actually, that they were able to discover the insulin from the pancreas of the dog actually. That was done in the University of Toronto, Canada, because this gentleman, Grant Frederick Banting, who discovered the insulin, has given credit to Charles H. Best and J.J.R. MacLeod and James Collip. Though their role is very, very nominal, I had been to the University of Toronto when I had a chance to attend a conference in Canada. So I had been to University of Toronto. I had taken multiple pics of this particular, the original pics actually. So he is the youngest doctor who has received the Nobel Prize at the age of 23 actually. In 1923, he was awarded Nobel Prize for the discovery of insulin. That was a landmark point in the entire history of medicine. And then later on came the animal insulin preparations. Let it be the bovine insulin, later on the porcine insulin was there. They used to write B on the box, and P for porcine they used to write, and porcine insulin was little bit better than the bovine insulin as far as the antigenicity was concerned. And later on in 1980s actually, the recombinant human insulin has come, and later on in 1990s the rapid acting analogs have come, that is the insulin Lispro has come, and after that followed by that and insulin aspart has come, insulin glulysin has come, so many things have come, and biphasic analogs have come in between, and the basal analogs have come in the year 2000, that's and the new generation analogs what we have, and the 2021, the happy 100th birthday of insulin. So let us all celebrate and give a great tribute to the discoverer of insulin, Grant Frederick Banting. Though surprisingly he was an orthopedic surgeon, he was able to discover insulin. That was the most funniest part of the thing. And what are the challenges with co-formulating basal insulins with the rapid acting analogs? So insulin glargine, that is U100, that is Aeglar U100 is soluble at pH of 4 actually. So if you see this, the normal pH being the 7, and the rapid acting analogs are soluble at pH of 7.4. and the insulin glargine is soluble at the pH of 4. So I-GLAR, the insulin glargine U100 is soluble at pH 4 and designed to micro precipitate at a neutral pH, that is 7.4 in subcutaneous tissue, whereas commercially available rapid acting insulins analogs are suitable at the pH of 7.4. And likewise you see the insulin detimer, the I-DET, that's what it is in the form of dihexamer actually, and the hybrid hexamers, and again the insulin aspart, that is the rapid acting insulin analog, that is found in the form of monohexamer, and the co-formulating I-DET, that is insulin detimer with commercially available rapid acting analogs, forms a hybrid hexamers with unpredictable pharmacokinetic profiles. And co-formulation of ultra long acting insulin degludec with rapid acting insulin aspart. So you can see here the combination of IDEC-ASP, that is insulin degludec plus insulin aspart, that is an ultra long acting, that is that works for more than, the plasma half-life is more than 36 hours, the insulin degludec, the basal insulin, and the rapid acting analog, the insulin aspart. I told you already the insulin degludec is available in the form of dihexamers, which then break down to the hexamers, and then they break down to the dimers, and the dimers break down into monomer, and monomeric insulin is the active insulin that works very effectively. And when you take this particular insulin aspart, it is in the form of hexamer, so hexamer has to break down to a dimer, dimer to monomer, and monomeric insulin is the active principle. So insulin, this particular formulation, insulin degludec and aspart, the insulin degludec is 70% and insulin aspart is 30%. So when you take this particular, I am not supposed to mention the brand, but the biphasic premixed insulin, the commonest being used is the Novo Nordisk brand, the human insulin, the human mixtard, that is 30-70 is available and 50-50 is available, and in some countries the 25-75 is available, even 10-90 is also available in other countries. So there the regular insulin is the 30% and the NPH is 70%, wherein the insulin aspart is 30%, whereas the insulin degludec, the basal, is 70%. So this IDEC-ASP, insulin degludec 70% plus insulin aspart 30%, existing separately in one single formulation, that is the speciality of this insulin IDEC-ASP, that is the Rhizodec, the only one product available all over the world, the best and the latest insulins. And when you see it in the subcutaneous depot, like always remember that insulin is to be given very cautiously into the subcutaneous fat only, not intramuscular or nothing else, and only in cases of emergencies like HHS or the DKA, we go for an insulin infusion of the regular insulin or the rapid acting insulin or short acting insulin. Then only we go for the emergencies, only we go for the intravenous preparations along with this fluids. So you can see this, the fat also, insulin degludec and aspart co-formulation, it is all the time, the blue ones are the dihexamers, and then the orange one is the single hexamer, that is the insulin aspart, the dihexamer being the insulin degludec, and it is broken down to insulin dihexamer and insulin hexamer, and when injected to the subcutaneous space, that is usually the preferred site is the tummy, and leave about say the 2 inches around the umbilicus on the left hand side and the right hand side, you can give the insulin, and the phenol diffuses quickly, and the IDEC dihexamers link up with via single chain that contains to form long multi-hexamers in the subcutaneous depot, and this is how it acts when injected into the body. So the zinc diffuses slowly, causing individual insulin deglutic hexamers to disassemble, releasing the monomers slowly. And IDEC asp and IDEC, insulin deglutic and insulin aspartate exist separately in solution. That's what I have been telling. It's a co-formulation in one single the pen or the cartridge. You find the dihexamers of insulin deglutic and the monohexamer of insulin aspartate. And on the right hand side you see a bar diagram showing the IDEC insulin deglutic dihexamer and insulin aspartate the hexamer, and the IDEC aspartate exists separately in the subcutaneous tissue. That's what been discussed already. You can find this. The blue ones are the insulin deglutic, and the orange ones are the insulin aspartate. And you can see in the right hand side bar diagram, you can see IDEC multi-hexamer and insulin aspartate monomer. And the insulin deglutic and aspartate at steady state has distinct prandial and basal glucose lowering effects. You can see this, the upper line, the dark blue is IDEC asp given at the dosage of 0.6 units per kilogram body weight, either once a day or you can make it twice a day. So, and the orange one is the prandial component and the green one is the basal component. You can very clearly see the time since injection in the hours, and you can see the meal time control with insulin aspartate and the flat and stable control of the basal insulin with insulin deglutic. You can see a steady peakless flattened curve with insulin deglutic, a uniform control with the combination of insulin deglutic and aspartate. You can very clearly see that. And in this diagrams, what it says is, so the safety aspect of the insulin deglutic and aspartate is been approved for in use in people with diabetes having the multiple comorbidities, multiple complications like the renal or the hepatic insufficiency. You can find the safety of both the IDEC asp and insulin deglutic in the upper one, the renal impairment and the hepatic impairment, and the insulin aspartate in the renal impairment and the hepatic impairment. You can see the normal and the mild, moderate and severe. It almost mimics the normal physiological secretion of a human pancreas. So people with no diabetes, where they have a normal the physiological human secretion of the pancreatic beta cells which secrete the insulin, you find a similar curve just like that that mimics the physiological secretion of the insulin. That is seen very classically with insulin deglutic and aspartate. And if here you find the insulin deglutic aspartate phase 3 clinical trial program overview, you can see at the bottom the comparators. The dark one, first one is versus insulin detimer, and the light one is versus biphasic insulin aspartate 30, and the light blue is versus insulin glargine U100, and the grey one is versus basal insulin plus insulin aspartate with meals, and the hollow one, that is versus IDEC asp. You can see the phase 3A and phase 3B. You can go through all these things. It's a busy slide. It takes a lot of time to explain. All of you know that, okay? Like wherever it goes, the upper hand is is taken by the insulin deglutic and aspartate. And indications for using insulin deglutic and aspartate: the start and stay therapy, that is patients are uncontrolled OADs, and that is patients on multiple OADs still not to the target and uncontrolled diabetes, and patients uncontrolled on basal insulins, patients uncontrolled on premixed insulins, patients uncontrolled on basal plus bolus therapy. These are all the indications for using the insulin degludec and aspart. Preferably this has to be BD in doses, not OD. This is as a basal plus. I don't say that it's going to take care of all these. The indications are taken care, but insulin degludec and aspart, when given BD in sufficient doses, and that will give a nice results in the following conditions. And the patient type is like type 1 DM or type 2 DM over the age of 18 years, and elderly with type 2 DM, and type 2 DM with renal or hepatic impairment, and the type 2 DM with other comorbidities. That's what I said. So it is applicable to all patients suffering from type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes over the age of 18. This combination can be taken up, and the latest RSSDI and the Endocrine Society of India clinical practice recommendations, the 2020, what it says, the RSSDI ESA clinical practice recommendations for the management of type 2 diabetes mellitus 2020, that says once a daily dose of IDEC ASP is recommended as a choice of initiation of insulin, and it's been recommended as per the Indian authorities are concerned, because these are the two largest bodies we have in India which regulate the guidelines for diabetes. One is the Research Study of Society for Diabetes in India, RSSDI, and the Endocrine Society of India. And avoid using insulin as a threat. See, don't threaten your patients. Don't use the insulin as a threat to your patients. Please counsel the patient that the patient needs insulin at that particular need of hour, and without that he may get into the microvascular or the macrovascular complications of diabetes, and it is so severe when compared with the comorbidities, other comorbidities like the associated hypertension doubles the risk, and associated dyslipidemia. These are all the risk factors which doubles or triples the risk factors, and the complications are the increased incidence of complications if the patient is not put on insulin in the exact need of hour actually. So try to counsel the patient that your pancreas is almost bankrupt, your pancreas cannot secrete the insulin sufficiently, it is not able to meet the demands of the body, so there is an imbalance between the demand and supply. So you try to translate your research into the colloquial language of the patient, you make him understand the importance of initiation of insulin, and then only your treatment will be successful, and patient acceptability and the tolerance also will go up. So avoid using insulin as a threat. Please don't threaten your patients. If you don't listen to me, I'll put you on insulin. Just like the mother when feeding the baby threatens the baby that some demon is going to come or something else. Don't use it as a threat, and alleviate patient anxiety about the insulin. If you talk about the facts and the realities, if you can translate research, once again I am telling you, if you can translate the research about insulin into the patient's colloquial language, you can alleviate the patient anxiety about the insulins. Most of the patients are very anxious that the doctor is going to put them on insulins, and no need to panic at all. You must have some little bit of patience to counsel the patient. Actually, you have to spend little bit of your time. First of all, you should have patience, then only you can counsel your patients with lot of patience. So insulin therapy should be considered in all patients failing to achieve glycemic targets on 3 oral agents. And we have come to the almost last slide of the talk today. My talk, not there is a co-speaker, and the summary is the first take-home message is nearly 4 in 5 people with diabetes in India are uncontrolled. This demands timely insulin initiation. And the second take-home message is high carbohydrate diet resulting in high postprandial glucose levels is a common Indian reality, and insulin degludec and aspart is a prudent choice for insulin initiation in Indians with type 2 diabetes mellitus, as it offers a total control, that is fasting plasma glucose plus postprandial plasma glucose. And the third and last take home message is, even the recent RSSDI ESI 2020 consensus recommends IDAC-ASP as a choice for insulin initiation as a basal plus OD usage. So with this, I conclude my session, and thanks all the participants for patient listening. Thank you so much.